Hey, everybody. Okay, thanks for being here again. We're going to be going over the second part of T.S. Eliot's great poem, The Wasteland. And you remember last time we talked about part one, which was titled The Burial of the Dead, The Burial of the Dead, which introduced us to a desiccated, death-bound society that is productive only of corpses. And you think of Eliot's writing just in the lee of the First World War and the vast and meaningless slaughter that conflict resulted in. Part one, burial of the dead, is a portrait of a society locked in self-slaughter with no hope of cultural redemption. The portrait of a society locked in hypocritical indecision, with no hope of meaningful cultural agency. Indecision, you remember Dante's early punishment in limbo of the indecisive. Eliot alludes to that and other elements of Dante's limbo in that first part. Okay, well, so today we jump into part two, which is called a game of chess. And we can talk about why as we continue. But essentially, what you're seeing here is a slight shift in theme. We're kind of global and universal, and then with those specific voices in part one. And here we talk about Eliot brings up the state of modern love in The Wasteland. And he presents modern love as a series of neurotic, desperate, self-deceptive, other-deceptive, futile maneuvers exactly like the moves in a game of chess, the title of the section. Now, in part two, we witness two scenes from Wasteland Lives. And y'all, each of these scenes is from both sides of the socioeconomic spectrum, so to speak. Both ends of the economic spectrum, both ends of the social spectrum, both ends of the psychological spectrum. And I think you'll see how this develops as we discuss the section. First of all, we witness the relationship of a neurotic, wealthy woman and her mate. And in the second section, we witness working class women, two working class women at a bar, at a pub, glibly gossiping about their jealousies, their betrayals, their sexual transgressions, and the consequences thereof. And throughout this presentation, Eliot invokes through allusion, and we're used to the highly allusive quality of Eliot's poetry coming out of Pound's allusions by now, and we understand the representational strategy of including those direct allusions to historically important literary precedents, right? So be sure you can preside over the logic of that move on the part of Eliot. In this case, Eliot invokes the great Shakespearean precedents. This montage of narratives, so it's a montage, it's a series of juxtaposed voices, right? This montage of narratives forces a kind of culturally sophisticated, literate, historically informed judgment, and profound irony results because of, as we've talked about before, the delta, the significant discrepancy between the dignity, the nobility, the august quality of those early precedents and their modern characterization, their modern narrativization today in the world of London 1922, 1921, 1922. Pardon me, allergies. Okay, and here are the Shakespearean works that Eliot alludes to. I'm sure you noticed these. You have footnotes for many of them. Antony and Cleopatra, Lear, The Tempest, and Hamlet. Antony and Cleopatra, Lear, The Tempest, Hamlet. In the first stanza, we see a rich woman whose luxury has created nothing but boredom, ennui, neurosis, hysteria, and anxiety. She's caught in sick and fruitless excess, in a place of too many unnatural colors, and too many unnatural smells. It's a portrait of an overwhelming, suffocating, oppressive life. It's a cloyed life, a life that's so full of excess as to drown the people who are living it in it. You turn to, if you see the allusion on page 90, on line 97, I'm assuming you have line numbers. If not, you can just count them out yourself. Line 97, there's a painting over the mantle I wanted to mention, and it's called The Change of Philomel. The Change of Philomel. Do you see that? Let's just look at page line 97. Above the antique mantle was displayed, as though a window gave upon the sylvan scene, the change of Philomel by a barbarous king, so rudely forced. Yet there, the nightingale filled all the desert with inviolable voice, and still she cried, and still the world pursues, jug, jug, to dirty ears. The story of the change of Philomel is this. There was a king whose name was Tereus. I have this for you in my sheet of names, places, and how to spell them for the wasteland. You'll see it. Tereus was the king, and he was married to a woman named Procne. Well, Procne had a sister named Philomel. Well, Tereus rapes Philomel. And as if that weren't horrific enough, he then takes a knife and cuts her tongue out so she can't speak. She can't tell the tale of this brutalization. But Philomel needle points. You're familiar with needlepoint work. Philomel needle points an image of the rape and shows it to her sister Procne. And when Procne sees this horrific and disturbing needlepoint image, she realizes what has happened. And she goes to her own son, whose name is Itys, I-T-Y-S. Some people pronounce it Itis, I-T-Y-S. She kills her own son and Tereus's son, Itys, and serves him as a meal to her husband. Those of you who've studied the classics recognize this kind of move. It's not uncommon among the classic myths. Lots of mothers, lots of fathers serving their own loved ones to them, usually in a righteous act of revenge, a ruthless but righteous act of revenge. In classical mythology, there are these many cycles of which we've termed them, these many cycles of self-consumption, that is, images of humanity eating itself, hurting itself in such a way that the only response can be vengeance, which continues the hate and continues the hurt and perpetuates the conflict and perpetuates the suffering. Sound familiar? That's why these are still relevant stories. That's why they're myths, because they speak to a circumstance that is unalienable from our humanity, sadly, in this case. Okay, well, so she kills Tereus's son Itys and serves him to her husband Tereus. Well, Tereus then, of course, lashes out and attempts to kill the sisters, but the gods turned the sisters into birds, allowing them to fly away and escape. And Philomel is turned into a nightingale, and Procne is turned into a swallow. So it's a mythic narrative, a narrative of betrayal, abuse, trust annihilated, brutality, brutalization, ruthlessness. But on the other hand, it's a myth involving art, needlepoint. And I think it's accurate to say at the time, a woman's art, needlepoint, as a form of self-expression and a form of resistance. And it's also a myth involving an assertion of the spiritual, cultural, and historical rightness of this mode of resistance. How do we know this? Because the gods abet the efforts of Philomel and Procne. They're on the side of the gods. You remember Martin Luther King's famous injunction, the arc of the universe is long, but it bends toward justice, right? And that's the in the world of the classical gods, the same often or even usually obtained. So there's a certain justice in this. But of course, this myth is presented ironically in juxtaposition with this wealthy woman. Yes, it's an image of brutalization, but there's beauty in the continuing nightingale's cry. And there's no analogous cry of the beautiful in these oppressive circumstances. And the implication of the lines I've read is that yes, though Philomel and Procne escaped, the rape of Philomel continues, so to speak. And we can't hear with our dirty ears, Eliot's line, with our dirty ears, we can't hear the cries that would give voice to those who've been oppressed in this way. We're deaf to those cries, and our mercy can't be engaged by them. We're callous. Our sensitivity has been dulled. Okay. Now the voices assert themselves after the first stanza, and we're privy to fragments of the depressed, neurotic, paranoid, despairing voices of modern love. We're witness to a fitful dialogue between two shattered lovers. And we hear, if you look at lines 120 to 126, those nothings. There's 6 nothings are repeated in 7 lines. And of course, this is an echo of the very famous nothings in Act 1 of King Lear, and not to mention the famous nevers, never, 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 5 in a row of Lear holding his daughter that he could not save in his arms. Her death a result of his own vanity. Those nothings invoke Lear. Lear, a deeply pessimistic play, which presents the nullification, nothing, right? The nullification, the negation of all fundamental human relationships, parent-child, wife-husband, sister-sister, brother-brother, friend-friend, all of those relationships that we feel to be core to our humanity, all called into question in that play. It's a very brutal play in that sense, a very dark play. Let me invoke the lines. So the voices begin after the first stanza. My nerves are bad tonight. Yes, bad. Stay with me. Speak to me. Why do you never speak? Speak. What are you thinking of? What thinking? What? I never know what you are thinking. Think. I think we're in Rat's Alley, where dead men lost their bones. What is that noise? It's the wind under the door. What is that noise now? What is the wind doing? Nothing. Again, nothing. Do you know nothing? Do you see nothing? Do you remember nothing? I remember. Those are pearls that were his eyes. Are you alive or not? Is there nothing in your head? Feel the vexed quality, the incommunicative quality, the failure of these wasteland sensibilities to bridge the distance between them and to overcome whatever it was that separated them in this way. To overcome whatever it was that created this failure of a relationship. I remember those are pearls that were his eyes. Okay, now that's a reference to The Tempest. Right? So we have Lear. We also have The Tempest. Some of you who know the Shakespeare well may know this. The Tempest, a deeply optimistic play, the opposite of Lear, which presents the fulfillment, not the negation, not the nullification, but the fulfillment of fundamental human relationship. The things work out in this great late play by Shakespeare. And those are pearls that were his eyes. Originally, that's Ariel you remember Prospero's creation, Ariel, the opposite of the Caliban principle, right? You have Caliban and Ariel. Ariel, Caliban, the creature of the earth, dark. Ariel, the creature, a spirit, a creature of the air. And she says to Ferdinand, telling Ferdinand falsely that his father has died in the shipwreck, right? And the line here, those are pearls that were his eyes, hint at death as a source of marvelous transformation. And the irony is, of course, in the mouth of this interlocutor, the mate who's talking to the original voice. The irony is there's not much marvelous going on here. Yeah, there's been a drowning, there's been a death, but the transformation catalyzed by that death has not been a propitious one, has not been an advantageous one, has not healed, has not wrought something beautiful and wonderful on the other side of the suffering. The lines are ironic. It's a memory of the hope of transformation, but a hope that like all promise in the wasteland, a hope that is destined for futility. Okay, then you hear this. This is one of the problems with Eliot. You hear there's an anti-jazz comment, and I'm not going to like that. It's you see the line, oh, that Shakespearean rag, oh, that Shakespearean, oh, that Shakespeare. It's a ragtime song that was actually from the Ziegfeld Follies. So this is something that Eliot might have heard in popular culture at the time, and he's presenting it here as kind of a banalized form of great human tragedy, the great human tragedy, the noble human tragedy, the dignified human tragedy, the mythic human tragedy that Shakespeare invokes so beautifully, that Shakespeare creates so beautifully in his great tragedies, and his great romances as well. The other side of the coin, the great mythic romances full of possibility, full of sweetness, full of light, full of succor, full of fulfillment, full of plenitude, as opposed to nothing. But in the case of nothing, the tragedies, and in the case of plenitude, the comedies, the romances, both treated with dignity and power and humanity and compassion and sensitivity by Shakespeare. Not the case in these wasteland lives. And after that little anti-jazz cut, you have first, we hear, after that banalized, form of great human tragedy and romance, Shakespearean rag, right? Shakespeare didn't write no rags. That's what Eliot's saying. As you know, I would take issue with his identification as ragtime as an inferior form, but there it is. That's Eliot, elitist to the core, if I may. That banalized form, ragtime, ironizes genuinely tragic human relationship as rendered by Shakespeare. And then that's followed by lines 131 through 4. First of all, a series of paralyzed, immobile, hysterical questions which imply the meaninglessness of all human action. And then in lines 135 through 8, the ritualized details of a relationship lived in passive, enervated, futile, anticipation of nothing. Let me see where we are time-wise. 24, good. Oh, that Shakespearean rag. It's so elegant, so intelligent. Right from the rag, right? That's a snippet from the song. What shall I do now? What shall I do? See the juxtaposition? Unexplained, the first reference, ironizing the second reference. The reference to Shakespearean tragedy and Shakespearean romance, utterly inadequate to express in its banalized form, right? Utterly inadequate to express the looming human truths of real, authentic tragedy and our real, authentic yearning for plenitude, for fulfillment, for love. So Eliot placing notice that's not explained. There's serial juxtapositions that in effect take the form of a superposition or a montage, right? The two of them together generate an idea, right? And we name it for ourselves as we move through the poem. And my naming it is going to be different than your naming of it, right? I'm just simply trying to provide a sort of a paradigm of interpretation for you. You see? It's more like how to do it, not what to do, but how to do it. Not what conclusions to arrive at, but how to arrive at your own, right? Okay. Well, then you have there at the stanza break there, you have a shift in scene, okay? And it's an important shift in scene. What you see, line 139 and after, is the second part of part 2, right, of a game of chess. We hear wasteland voices from the opposite side of the social spectrum. Okay, so look at the this is all conversational, these voices. Look at the idioms and the language and the syntax and the diction of the first set of voices, and then look at the analogous elements of conversation in the second part here. So wasteland voices from the opposite side of the social spectrum. We hear working class women talking at a pub, speaking, Eliot, demotic English. That word demotic, only a deep snob and elitist would use the word demotic. It's the DE, it's a cut, demotic, it's a slur. It means common. And the DEM there is the same root as democracy. The DEM, demos, means people. So demotic English would be the language of the people. Our word would be the vernacular. The vernacular. People forget vernacular comes from a Latin word verna, which means slave. So the vernacular, the language of the slaves, the language of the common. So Eliot uses the term demotic. They're speaking demotic English, and they're gossiping about a couple that they both know. The woman of the couple is named Lil, and the male of the couple is named Albert. Okay, so the idea is it's two. We only hear the one woman speak here, right? The speaker is distinct with just one voice. But the idea is Eliot marks this as gossip. So he could have, think about it, he could have constructed this scene, so to speak, in a different way. He could have actually rendered presentationally the conversation between the speaker and Lil, right? He could have made it direct, but he doesn't want to do that because he wants it to be gossip, because gossip, that indirect cutting discourse, again, emblematic of wasteland friendship. Okay. So they gossip, right? And their gossip is punctuated by the repeated announcement of the bartender. that the pub is closing. And you hear that periodically in this section. Hurry up, please, it's time. Hurry up, please, it's time. And to this day, if you go to a pub in England, this is exactly the line that you hear. Hurry up, please, it's time. It's come down through the ages, a ritualized assertion by the bartender at the close of the evening. And we hear in this speaker's mouth and in the way she reports the conversation between her and Lil, we hear things that should be discussed with tenderness, things that should be discussed with sensitivity, things that should be discussed with seriousness, things that should be discussed with compassion. We hear these things get discussed with glib, vulgar callousness. Note, there's an allusion to Hamlet at the end of this section. We hear the voice of Ophelia. So there's yet another allusion. Eliot's really ticking all the boxes here. An allusion to Hamlet. So we hear the voice of Ophelia, a true innocent in Hamlet, whose mind has been damaged by what she must endure in the play because of her deep, pure, romantic love for Hamlet. So the phrase, "Good night, sweet ladies, good night," right there at the very end of the section, that language comes directly from Gertrude is Hamlet's mother, remember? If you haven't read Hamlet, give it a look. That language comes from Gertrude's description, Hamlet's mother's description of Ophelia's insane grief as she takes her own life by drowning. And those are literally her last words, right? So y'all see, here's how it works. This is pure Eliot. Note the ironic usage here. The pure, vulnerable love of Ophelia, frankly expressed, honestly communicated to her love, Hamlet, juxtaposed, ironically, to the vulgar, tawdry, callous outlook of these women. And again, there's Eliot working in juxtapositions that become, in their serial nature, the way to think of it is because of their thematic proximity, because they overlap, so to speak, in terms of the human reality that they express, the human condition that they explore, because of that thematic overlap, the beauty and correspondence of that thematic overlap, literally all the scenes become each other. I mean, you see these ladies in the light of Ophelia, and Ophelia in the light of these ladies, and the irony shimmers between the two chemically. Ideas rushing in and out. You see, of that dyad, that two that functions as one chemically, creating a tension that in turn creates an idea and a feeling, a head and a heart. That's Eliot, that's poetry, and that's what Pound is getting at. Yeah? Look at the language is just beautiful and haunting. Let me invoke it. Okay. Okay, so we have the shift in scene at 139. When Lil's husband got demobbed, I say, some people say demobbed, some people say demobbed. It comes from demobilized. In other words, when he was able to take a break from the war, right? World War I. When Lil's husband got demobbed, I said, I didn't mince my words. It's the two ladies gossiping. One of them is talking about it's a conversation about a conversation. Yeah. I didn't mince my words. I said to her myself, hurry up, please. It's time. Bartender. Now Albert's coming back. He's been demobilized, right? He's coming back to London. Now Albert's coming back. Make yourself a bit smart. He'll want to know what you've done with that money he gave you to get yourself some teeth. I'm sorry, I just have to comment. I really you can just feel Eliot's squeamishness here at the physicality of these women. I find it somewhat offensive. You can sense that Eliot, in his fastidiousness, in his sense of the pure and the cleanly, his sense of being above it all, and that elitist sense of superiority. I find it very, I find it difficult to take. As brilliant as the language and as brilliant as the insights are. You could just, you always think of Whitman, so in love with his body, so in love with his physicality, so in love with his sexuality, right? He says, aroma of my armpits, odor of my armpits, aroma finer than prayer. Eliot, it seems to me, is afraid of his body. He's afraid of his smells. He's afraid of our smells. He's afraid of his sexuality. His wife is in the insane asylum. His wife is being given psychiatric care at this moment, the moment of the construction of this great poem. Gee, I wonder why. I wonder what it was like to be being married to old Tom. I hate to lose a tooth in front of old Tom. I hate to gain 20 pounds. Hate my boobs to sag. Hate my esophagus to collapse like mine is collapsing. Hate my hairline to go away like mine has gone away in front of this guy who seems so offended by the reality of our physical decay as human beings. But enough. I gotta get past this. But I just want you to know that we don't have to lionize these poets. We need to critique them. We need to critique their racism. We need to critique their homophobia. We need to critique their royalist politics. We need to critique the elements of their personality that we feel clouds their assessment of our humanity. The problem is they write such badass poetry. It's, you have to acknowledge that, and you have to address yourself to the beautiful and impactful and insightful qualities of their work. But always remembering that they are vulnerable as well, like all of us are. Okay. He'll want to know what you've done with the money he gave you to get yourself some teeth. And you think, she doesn't have teeth. And then, what did she do with the money? He did. I was there. So that's to the speaker's conversationalist, her interlocutor at the pub. He did. I was there. You have them all out, Lil, and get a nice set. So he's telling, have the bad ones removed, get dentures. You get them all out, Lil, and have a nice set, he said. I swear I can't bear to look at you. He says that to his wife, Lil, in front of the speaker. And no more can't I said. Gee, that's a good supportive friend. And no more can't I said. And think of poor Albert. He's been in the army for 4 years. He wants a good time. And if you don't give it him, there's others will, I said. So you can feel there Eliot intimating at betrayal. Eliot intimating that this is the way wasteland friendships operate, faithlessly. And if you don't give it him, there's others will, I said. Oh, is there, she said. Something of that, I said. Oh, is there, she said. Something of that, I said. Then I'll know who to thank, she said, and give me a straight look. Hurry up, please, it's time. If you don't like it, you can get on with it, I said. Others can pick and choose, if you can't. But if Albert makes off, it won't be for lack of telling. You ought to be ashamed, I said, to look so antique. So I'm going to continue reading. But so you see what the speaker is saying to Lil. The speaker is saying, you better fix yourself up, or else somebody's going to come along and take Albert away from you. And that somebody is likely to be me. And you know who you can thank? If I decide to do that with Albert, you can thank yourself. So that radical failure of compassion, that radical failure of sensitivity, that arrogance, that narcissism, all wasteland attributes, all attributes of modern love, a la the wasteland. This is a deep lament on Eliot's part, isn't it? A deep lament of what he had, what he believes what he is seeing his culture as becoming. And my earlier diatribe against Eliot notwithstanding, there's truth in what he's saying. There's truth in that growing incivility, truth in that failure of compassion on a cultural level, national level. There's truth in that failure of sensitivity, failure of friendliness, failure of loyalty. And we recognize it. God help us. You ought to be ashamed, I said, to look so antique and her only 31. I can't help it, she said, pulling a long face. It's them pills I took to bring it off, she said. Them pills I took to bring it off. She's had 5 already. So we're talking about children. And nearly died of young George. So them pills I took to bring it off refers to an abortion. So this is 1921, 1922. Abortion not legal in England until 1967. And Eliot, as a very retrogressive Anglican, with a very elitist understanding of and masculinist understanding of the human condition. It's just anathema to Eliot. You can feel them. You can feel his disgust. It's them pills I took to bring it off, she said. She's had 5 already and nearly died of young George. The chemist, the druggist, the chemist said it would be all right, but I've never been the same. Oh, you are a proper fool, I said. Well, if Albert won't leave you alone, then there it is, I said, referring to sexual contact between man and wife. What did you get married for if you don't want children? Hurry up, please. It's time. Well, that's those. Now she's back with her interlocutor talking to the woman sitting next to her at the bar. Well, that Sunday, Albert was home. They had a hot gammon, a ham. Oh, and it's just so good. This line is just so good. That hot ham after this talk of unwanted children and abortions and rotting teeth and betrayal. Well, come over and have a hot ham with us. And you could smell it. It's practically you never want to eat pork again after reading this line. Well, that Sunday, Albert was home. They had a hot gammon, and they asked me into dinner to get the beauty of it hot. Hurry up, please. It's time. Hurry up, please. It's time. And now here you hear the voices of the people in the pub saying goodbye to one another. Good night, Bill. Good night, Lou. Good night, May. Good night. Ta-ta. Good night. Good night. As the people file out. Good night, ladies. Good night, sweet ladies. Good night. Good night. And that's Ophelia's voice. Gives me chills. That's Ophelia's voice coming in at the end. The image of the pure, romantic, loyal, devoted Ophelia, disconsolate at the love that she bears for Hamlet, not being reciprocated in the way that it should be, juxtaposed to the callous disregard for compassion and for the possibility of love, and the possibility of friendship that we've just seen expressed in the language of this woman sitting at the pub, speaking to a companion. The irony is just debilitating.